Joining us now is Frank Zaccanelli.
Frank Zaccanelli.
Let's welcome Frank Zaccanelli.
Live from the Real News Studios in Dallas, Texas, welcome to the To Be Frank Show. Your host, Frank Zaccanelli, has been in the world of domestic and international business and professional sports for 40 years. And as a former minority owner, president, and general manager of the Dallas Mavericks, he's been asked to comment on current events in the national news for most of his professional career. But what he and many others are really looking for is a place to find just the facts. Welcome to the To Be Frank Show.
Live from Dallas, welcome to the To Be Frank Show. I'm your host, Frank Zaccanelli, and welcome to episode number 11 of the To Be Frank Show. We're really excited about the show today. We've got a great guest and we've got really good stuff for everybody. I want to reiterate and remind everyone that if you're trying to watch and interested in watching the To Be Frank Show, you could reach us at the To Be Frank Show YouTube, the To Be Frank Show Twitter, the To Be Frank Show LinkedIn, the To Be Frank Show Facebook, and the added medium for people that don't know how to use the internet, the tobefrankshow.com, which you can go pick up the episodes if you miss them live. So welcome to our show. We have a tremendous guest today. His name is Jason Redman. And Jason is a retired Navy SEAL and a New York Times best-selling author. And we're going to have a great discussion with Jason about a myriad of different things when we get him on in about 20-25 minutes. So what we want to do is we want to cover the headlines in the monologue today, and we've got 5 different segments on things that I think are important. I want to tell you, though, a personal story. This week, I was out picking up food in restaurants, to-go orders that I was bringing home to my family. And I live in Plano, Texas, which is a suburb of Dallas, Texas. And as you all know, Texas has not been the hub of great execution as it relates to how to handle the coronavirus. It's been a huge problem. The numbers are coming down somewhat, so maybe people are now starting to understand that you have to not only have people with face masks and you have to social distance, you have to also police this. And that's pretty much what I want to talk about in the opening piece of this. I went into a restaurant, a pizza place, and I'm not going to use their name. And I went in to pick up a to-go order, and I have my mask on, and I walk in, and I'm going to the place where you pick up the order, and the bar is mobbed. It is completely mobbed. There's no 50%. There's no 60%. There's no 80%. The place is full. And bar stools are placed where I thought that, you couldn't even have bar stools, but if you can have bar stools, they got to be 6 feet apart. These things were a foot apart, okay? And you're supposed to have a mask on coming in and coming out and all the pieces. I mean, I've read all the regulations. Now, how do I know the regulations? I called the Plano hotline. Now, anybody that wants to call their hotline, get ready for one of the jerkiest things that you've ever been involved with. And the people are nice, but they don't tell you anything. Well, here's the regulation from the governor, and here's what the mayor has said, and here's what this. I said, well, what's the protocol on enforcing this? This is the equivalent again. Let's talk to our LA viewers. On the 405, if you could go 100 miles an hour and you knew there'd be no cops there, you'd go 100 miles an hour. Okay? There's no policing. If you're not going to police the ordinances and everything that you're doing on the coronavirus locally, how the hell do you expect that there's going to be any change in anything? And I'll tell you right now, I live in one of the greatest cities that's a suburban city to a major city, Dallas, in the country. The schools are the best in the country here. It's safe. There's a great quality of life. The problem is that people, like everywhere it seems, are completely undisciplined, and if there's no enforcement of anything, it's not going to happen. And so this really shook me up because it really bothers me. And everyone's like, okay, well, this is really old people in nursing homes again. That's the same dialogue you keep hearing. Hey, Grandma, we may not see you again, but, hang in there. And God forbid, we'll throw a party for you. That was the preemptive discussion, a couple of months ago. Well, this only happens to old people. Has anybody thought about what happens to young people that are having babies, have had babies, are going to have babies? Has anyone thought about them and the issues as it relates to this? I mean, I told you about the situation down in Corpus Christi a couple of shows ago that 85 children under the age of 1 year old contracted the coronavirus. You pick up the newspaper today and you see that Herman Cain, the presidential candidate, died of the coronavirus. Guy was 74, okay? He was not ready to check out. But, this is what happens. I mean, who knows how this virus really affects certain people? But I can tell you, it's not just about old people in nursing homes. I mean, this thing is all over the place. So I just suggest again, if you're a city official, especially in my city, and you're listening, you better figure out how the hell you're going to police this. And then I said, so is there a fine? Well, we give them a warning on the first incident. You're giving them a warning. Okay, well, after the warning, then what happens? Well, it's a $250 fine. If the guy's doing $10,000 a day in his restaurant, do you really think he cares about $250? I mean, it's a joke. So we got to get serious about this. I saw it. I thought it was worth mentioning at the top of the show. Okay. So let's go to our first segment. There's a lot being talked about and said now about the new economic stimulus package that is being negotiated between these knuckleheads in Washington. And not all of them are knuckleheads. My congressman's one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet, and he's as competent as there can be. And there's competent people up there. But the problem is that these people have signed a blood oath that they're going to hate the other side, and they're not going to deal with the other side, and especially in election politics, okay, presidential election politics. This has gotten ridiculous. So now there's another $1 trillion that's coming down the pike. Not a million, not a billion, $1 trillion, okay? That's so much money, you couldn't even put it in the studio, okay? So the fact of the matter is that all we're really doing now is trying to appease people that really need the help. But at some point, there's got to be a situation to where there is a mix between opening up your city and doing it right. Now, I'll tell you, Dallas, Plano, I don't think they've completely done it right. This is where I live. New York won't even open it up. And there's places that won't even open it up. Now, is that a protest against Trump? I think there's politics laden in everything. And that's really sad. Because now we want to borrow more money, another $1 trillion. Now, let me give you a few statistics on this, okay? So the new stimulus plan is $1 billion. The Peter G. Peterson Foundation stated that at the end of March, okay, of this year, we had $23.7 trillion in national debt. Let me repeat that. $23.7 trillion in national debt. We're hocked up worse than Aunt Mary. Everybody's got an Aunt Mary that just went nuts on the credit cards and did everything else, and now all of a sudden, how am I going to pay for this and everything else? $23.7 trillion of debt and counting before this $1 billion. Now, for the Donald, okay, because I can call him the Donald now. I explained that last show. He watches the show privately. I'm semi-advising him through the show. Everyone knows what the hell's going on. He had the nickname in the real estate business, the king of debt, okay? As it relates to our country, How much more money are we going to borrow? We can't pay back what we borrowed. Now, the $23.7 trillion is 82% of our gross domestic product. That is everything that is made and all the services in the United States. It's 82%. Now, here's the problem. It's the highest percentage at 82% since 1948 in the United States. We're going down a path here, ladies and gentlemen, that we're not going to be able to pay for this. We're just not going to be able to pay for this. And I have incredible compassion for the people that are out of work, why they're out of work. They didn't cause it. We need to stand behind the people, but we've got to figure out how to safely get people back to work, because we're not a socialist society. We're not France. We're not Italy. We're not that type of society. We can't continue to keep people out of work. So what happens in Florida, Texas, Arizona, Georgia? What happens there? They open up, but there's no protocols. There's no policing. That's not right either. I've covered this on the show till I can't cover it anymore. So the fact of the matter is, where the hell's the happy median? That's what's got to be found out. But we are putting ourselves in debt beyond belief. Now, the greatest businessman that I've ever been around, and the greatest businessman, in my opinion, one of them in United States history, was H. Ross Perot. In 1992, he ran for president, okay? And he ran as an independent. And in April or May of that election year, he was ahead. And then, of course, the dirty tricks crew and everybody came after him. He ended up getting 20% of the vote, which is the highest by far of any independent ever. And this guy was the greatest businessman I've ever been around, and one of the greatest businessmen in the history of the United States. At that time, he made as part of his platform the situation about the national debt. This is 1992, 28 years ago. Guess what the national debt was? A little less than $4 trillion. We've now added, in the last 28 years, we've now added $20 trillion to the national debt. This would be like somebody, now I'm trying to get it to come home to everybody. It'd be like you having a house that's worth $500,000 and you got $2.2 million loaned against it. I would tell you you're underwater. Roll the tape.
Senate Republicans have presented us with a half-hearted, half-baked legislative proposal. In short, the Republican plan is too little, too late.
So Phil Mattingly's been covering this. He's out front on Capitol Hill. So, Phil, this is setting the stage for a massive fight, right? I mean, they are not even close, and obviously these expire this week. So where's this headed?
Yeah, look, it's a convergence of several events that don't necessarily look good for actually getting something done within the course of 1 week. Democrats have their own $3 trillion proposal on unemployment specifically. They want to extend the $600 benefit through the end of the year. Obviously, Republicans in a very different place on that, and that's just one of a myriad of items where they are very, very far apart. Now, the big question is, what can Democrats in the administration start to work towards some type of path on? And we should find out shortly. Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Senator Schumer are in Pelosi's office right now, meeting with Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin, White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows. This is the first real meeting they've had since a Republican proposal has been presented, but there's no question about it. And there's a lot of work to do and such little time to actually do it. Real questions right now whether there's any chance they can stop those benefits from lapsing at the end of this week.
Okay. So there you hear that the Democrats wanted a $3 trillion plan on top of the $3 trillion that you just had 3 months ago. I mean, these people are not spending their own money. This is like a printing press, you know. That'd be like if, my father used to tell my mother all the time, "Hey, Marge, what do you got back there? You got a money tree? Just go in the back and pick it off the tree." That was one of his, favorite lines. The fact of the matter is, what do they have up there? They have a money tree somewhere on Capitol Hill where they're getting this money? Where the hell is this money coming from? Let me give you another statistic that will really put it into perspective. Based on the Brookings Institute, In 2019, okay, 2019, the United States government took in $3.5 trillion in revenue. That's taxes and all categories. $3.5 trillion. But you want the bad news? Guess what happened? We spent $4.4 trillion. So there, we had a $900 billion deficit. 1 year, okay? So now the $900 billion is added directly to the national debt on top of all this stuff. And here we go down the road. This thing is not only out of control, it's going to affect everyone's lives. Now, the coronavirus obviously has affected everyone's lives, but we got to find a balance. We just can't continue to print money up in Washington. These legislators, I mean, has anyone looked at these numbers? These numbers are real. We owe $24 trillion before this next billion or $3 trillion or gazillion. And here we are last year at a $900 billion deficit. We're only taking in $3.5 trillion a year. We're spending $4.4. Simple math. Think about it in your own household. Your husband comes home, he's making $100,000 a year, and you're spending $200,000. How long is that going to last? Not very long. Okay. The second segment that we're going to talk about is the canyon-wide divide in Washington, D.C. I mean, it is so bad, ladies and gentlemen. All you got to do is watch it. I got more people calling me and writing to me now than ever before. I can't watch this stuff anymore. It makes me sick. It's just a bunch of crybabies up there that want to pick on each other. They're not getting anything done. If you watch this tape, this is going to tell you everything that you ever needed to know about how childish our elected officials are in Washington, D.C. Roll the tape.
It's really, he was like a blob. He was like just a henchman for the President of the United States instead of the Attorney General of the United States of America.
He says that she's saying he's a henchman, and he said yesterday, Barr said yesterday, that the president expects me to exercise my independent judgment to make calls the way I think are right, and that's exactly what I have done. He said that he insists that he acts independent of the president. Nancy Pelosi is saying he's a henchman and a blob, and there's a double standard there. What if someone called a woman a blob? What's your response?
Yeah. No, it's terrible, but this is the same individual who said that the president of the United States is an imposter back during impeachment. The guy who 63 million Americans voted for, she called an imposter. So I don't take what she says about people in the administration very seriously. Bill Barr, as I said earlier, is doing a good job. He is committed to the rule of law. He said something else yesterday that's so important. He said he is tired of the double standard. The one set of rules for the political elite. If your name is Comey, Clapper, Brennan, you get one set of rules, and then us regular folks get another set. He is tired of that, and that's why Mr. Durham is doing the investigation to find out what happened. So I thought that was another great line that is so consistent with administering the rule of law and having equal justice under the law.
Right. All right, so you just saw, Fox's view of the world, which is not our view of the world, but I got to use a tape from somewhere. But what this is all about is that you have, as I've said almost every show, you've got a broken system in Washington. It is not working. Bill Barr, who I personally think is a qualified guy. Now, why do I say that? It has nothing to do with Donald Trump hiring him. It's the fact that he worked for Herbert Walker Bush back in the day. This guy has got a long resume. Is he a Republican operative? I wouldn't call him a Republican operative. Was Barack Obama's Attorney General a Democratic operative? I wouldn't say that, but clearly they're appointed by whoever's the president. So the guy goes up to Capitol Hill and they want to ask him questions, and all these people in Congress do on one side of the equation, which I could care less about, the Democrats or the Republicans, about who's got the upper hand or who's winning. I'm worried about our country. But they don't even let the guy answer the questions. It's embarrassing. It's terrible. And it's childish. And look at the way that the rest of the world is looking at us. It's terrible. And they're going to justify it by, oh, this guy is Donald Trump's bagman and he's this and he's that. Well, look at, when you're president of the United States, you get to appoint the attorney general. That's part of what you do, okay? And so Bill Barr is clearly a guy that's got a tremendous amount of experience, a tremendous amount of knowledge. And if you don't like him, then you don't like him. But the fact of the matter is, there's got to be a level of decorum and respect. What are we teaching our kids? God forbid if our kids ever watch one of these hearings. I mean, it was one of the worst things I ever saw. They literally wouldn't let the guy answer a question because it was all orchestrated by these talking points. Now, between you and me, Republicans do the same thing, okay? This election, by the way, like everything else in life that I talk about, is going to be decided right here. I happen to be part of the 20% that are independent voters that look at the facts and then decide how we're going to vote. You could play to your base now all day long. The Democrats are making a gigantic mistake around policing, the riots in Portland and Seattle, which we're going to get to in a minute. Okay? They're making a tremendous mistake on lawlessness and calling riots protests and everything else. We're going to get to that. The Republicans, on the other hand, have completely butchered, and I mean butchered, the coronavirus scenario. Trump now has pivoted. I've talked about this on the last two shows. He watches my show from the Oval Office. I advised him through the show, and now he's pivoted. Now, let's wear masks. Let's do this. Let's do that. He's trying to figure out now how he can get out of this coronavirus mess because it is the main reason that he's behind in the polls, okay? It's the main reason. But the Democrats, on the other hand, they tripled down on this Portland, Seattle, New York City stuff, and then they bring Bill Barr up there and they make complete jerks of themselves. This is really, really bad. And I wish that we could just have a country where it was democratic, we could debate the issues, we could then treat people with respect. How do they ever expect for people in the mainstream to treat anybody with respect with the way that they operate? So it's hard to watch, to be completely honest. All right, segment 3, baseball on the brink. Now, hopefully some of you watched my show, last show on Monday. I had Brad Townsend, who's one of the 10 reporters that was picked by the National Basketball Association to be embedded in, quote, the bubble for the NBA, okay? Brad Townsend talked about every protocol known to man in this bubble. All the teams are there. All the games are being played there. Anybody that leaves there has an ankle bracelet on. It's like house arrest, okay? Now, you're going to have a few issues here and there, but there's protocols on top of protocols in the NBA. And that is in my opinion, that's a real salute to Adam Silver being the NBA commissioner and really giving this an incredible amount of thought. As again, most of you know on my background, I was involved with the NBA for 5 years. But Adam Silver is to be incredibly patted on the back, if you will, for the work that he's done surrounding the bubble, okay? And putting this thing in the safest way that they can actually play games. Let's look at baseball. Baseball now has gotten started, and they don't have a bubble. Now, could you create a bubble for baseball? I really think you could. You could have 4 baseball fields and 2 hotels, and you could have the whole shooting match. You don't need to put teams on the road where they go around the country, and then after the games, you know, they're out and they're, you know, drinking, going to dinner, whatever's going on. The Florida Marlins had to now suspend their season until now they're saying Sunday, who knows when, because they had 10 or 12, 15 people come down with the virus, okay? They're only coming down with the virus because they're not following the protocol, clearly, because after the games, they're not going back to the hotel, and they're not doing the things that are required. And to be honest, I had my crack-up staff today try to find out a list of all the protocols, and we can't find them. Now, Rob Manfred, who's the commissioner of baseball, is not one of my favorite guys. The way that he's handled things across the board. I mean, baseball commissioner back in my day was the most revered job maybe in America, okay? Rob Manfred, I don't know where this guy's come from, number one, but number two, look at the way he handled the Houston Astros cheating scandal, okay? That's been publicized. I mean, there were really no fines, no suspensions. There might have been a few fines. I mean, it was a joke. They should have suspended players for a year. They should have taken away, and I love Houston, and I actually was rooting for the Astros. But you know what? You can't cheat and win. You cheat and win, it's wrong. So Rob Manfred, who's the commissioner, who's really nowhere to be found, he gives a terrible interview, but more importantly, you're going to have to put the protocols in place. Because if you don't put the protocols in place, this is going to happen over and over and over. Roll the tape.
The Miami Marlins are stuck in Philadelphia tonight after several members of the team tested positive for COVID-19 during the first weekend of Major League Baseball's truncated season. Correspondent Phil Keating has got the latest for us tonight from Miami.
Oh, boy. After beating the Philadelphia Phillies last night, instead of flying back to Miami for tonight's home opener, the Marlins stayed put in quarantine after 10 players and coaches tested positive for coronavirus. The home opener is now canceled, as is tonight's game in New York between the Phillies and Yankees, all throwing the league's plan for a shortened season up in the air.
When you have teams that are traveling to different cities and you're not living in a bubble, and coronavirus is spreading in the manner that it is across the country, that this was bound to happen.
Today is a day of hope. Today is a day of promise.
Okay, Pence. It's a day of hope, day of promise. Great. It's a great message to put out there. Promise and hope for what? But the bottom line is, when it comes to baseball, and it comes to the fact that Brad Townsend on my last show, who's as smart as anybody in the sports business, you know, why didn't baseball go to the NBA model? Why didn't they do that? They could have done it, but they didn't do it. And it looks like, to me, it's a three-ring circus because the protocols are not there. They're not in place. You're putting players on airplanes. You're flying them all around. What the hell do you think's going to happen? So we're going to keep an eye on the story. I'm telling you, it's 8-5 pick'em in Las Vegas that Major League Baseball will not finish the season if this type of thing continues. It's just not going to happen. So we'll keep an eye on the story. Okay, the next segment is about the riots that continue in the United States Northwest, in Portland, in Seattle. Portland, I mean, what a mess. Teddy Wheeler, okay? The mayor of Portland. What a beauty he is. And then you got Jenny Durkin, the Summer of Love. She's another beauty, okay? And I'm not taking political sides. But how can people not see this as clear as the nose on their face? If they're going to burn down the federal courthouse and you're not going to stop them, do you not expect the feds to come in and save the courthouse from being burnt down? What the hell do you think their responsibilities are? Okay? And now you're saying it's all political fodder for Trump. This is killing you on the Democratic side. Trump went off the cliff, as I've mentioned over and over and over, on the coronavirus. And he's now down in the polls. But if you guys on the Democratic side keep this up, you guys are going to go off the cliff. And then we're going to have two parties that are off the cliff, and who the hell knows what's going to happen? Maybe that's what we're destined for in America during the weirdest year of my lifetime, 2020. Roll the tape.
This morning, Seattle bracing for more chaos. A Federal agents out of sight on standby. Violent clashes between Seattle police and protesters lighting up the night sky. Over the weekend, 59 officers injured and 47 people arrested. Police declaring a riot due to the damage. This peaceful protest turning into a tense standoff. An uprising in solidarity with neighboring Portland.
What is going on? We need to know. Who are you?
Where protesters have been clashing with federal officers sent by the Trump administration to put an end to the violence. Terrifying scenes like these now a nightly occurrence. Court order sought by the state's attorney general to stop federal agents from arresting people during protests denied. In response to the decision, President Trump tweeting in part, the protesters are actually anarchists who hate our country.
Okay, so, pictures tell 1,000 words. I mean, you see this. Now, here's the irony, as I see it. In the beginning, the George Floyd killing, which was completely uncalled for, worst thing I ever saw on TV, everybody should go to jail, the whole shooting match. Issued out then these protests that got started in most of our cities. For the most part, a lot of the protests had a high percentage of protesters that were lawful. Mixed in, any protest, you're going to have the anarchists, you're going to have all these other things that go on, okay? Take a look at Seattle and take a look at Portland. How many African Americans do you see that are in the middle of these protests? I don't see many at all. And this thing all started with George Floyd, okay? And they had a right to protest. Got to remember again, I say it every show, the First Amendment, and which makes us different than any country on the planet Earth, is that we have the right to have our voices heard. What we don't have the right to do is destroy public property, okay, ruin cities. And so now these mayors, the Summer of Love and Teddy Wheeler, are basically saying, Trump, get your federal agents out of here. They're saying Trump's doing this because of political gains. Well, both are right, okay? Because the Democrats on one side are so dumb that they don't see the fact that this is their coronavirus. This is just, I mean, it's as obvious as anything. If I could sit down with people in 10 minutes, I could have them understanding that you're blowing it over here with the way that you're handling this. Let people peacefully protest. These aren't peaceful protests. And what happened to George Floyd? Anybody talking about him anymore? Okay? So hopefully you're getting the point here now, is that this was all pent up in these places, just waiting for a George Floyd scenario to happen so they could go in and become anarchists. That's what I see. And the Democrats have tripled down on it. It's a big mistake. You had Trump on the ropes. But now, you better start thinking about what that guy in the middle here, that 20%, is doing when he sees this stuff on television. It's not good. And it's not a good look. And unfortunately, it's not smart politics. So like the Donald, who watches my show secretly and, all that stuff, Joe Biden in the basement needs to be watching the show. Joe, watch the show. And we'll give you all the insight that you're looking for. Okay. The last segment before we have Jason Redman on, we're going to play a clip on the election. And I wanted to cover a couple of pieces of that. Roll the tape.
Hello everybody and welcome back to another EP video. Today we're going to be analyzing and ranking the 6 toss-ups of the 2020 election cycle. These are the states of Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, Florida, and Arizona. Donald Trump carried each of these states in the 2016 election, along with the state of Michigan, winning the Electoral College with 306 electoral votes to Hillary Clinton's 222. Things are obviously looking a lot different heading into this November's election, with Joe Biden heavily favored to take back the state of Michigan, and as things stand right now, he is leading in virtually every swing state poll. However, in today's video, we're going to be ranking the 6 states that are sure to be the most competitive in 2020. Coming in at 6th is the state of Georgia. Georgia is the closest in terms of polling numbers, with Biden currently ahead by 1.7 points in 538's polling averages. As you'll see later, the other states that I have labeled as more competitive than Georgia all have Biden further ahead. That's because I maintain a firm belief that these early polls are favoring Biden by a lot more than he will ultimately win by. I expect polls to narrow in the months leading up to Election Day and ultimately for Trump to outperform polls by, say, 1 to 3 points.
All right, so someone, now you're sitting back. Do you know why I use that tape? Because you literally cannot use any election information from the 3 cable networks or any of the national networks. You cannot use them. They are so skewed, they are so ideologically based that you can't even look at them. You can't even listen to the narrative. So let me break it down. You guys saw red states, and you saw blue states, and then you saw gray states. Let me go through the gray states. The gray states are Arizona, Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. And unless I'm missing it, the Donald won every one of those states last time. Arizona's the only one I'm not sure of. But I believe that he won all those other states. I think he won them all. Okay? So here's the point. The point is that this election is going to be razor thin. It is. This 11 points and 10 points, this is all going to go away. And you can play to your base all you want. The Donald spends way too much time playing to his base, and so do the Democrats. So 20% right here that are going to dictate what happens in this election. Right now, based on the polls and the coronavirus, everybody's moved left. Okay? They have. That's what the numbers are saying. But what's going to happen is, if the Democrats continue to do what they're doing with hearings like Bill Barr, Seattle, Portland, it's going to come back right here again. Now, the Donald made another mistake today, and Donald, I hope you're listening. Today, he floated the idea in a tweet to delay the election from the November 3rd election. How the hell did he come up with this one? I mean, this is one of the worst things that you could be doing 95 days out from the election. Now you're talking about potentially delaying the election. It looks like that you're worried that you're behind, you need more time. That's what it looks like to me. But why the hell would you ever tweet this? I mean, this whole Twitter thing, man, you don't see me on Twitter. If somebody's tweeting for me, they're tweeting about watch the show. I'm not getting into this. You cannot win, okay? And I understand why he does it. He does it because, quite frankly, he doesn't feel he gets good coverage in the press. But coming out today and floating the idea of potentially delaying the election, he's going to catch so much stuff on this one. Just stay tuned. So we're going to keep in touch with the polls in the election and both sides and the mistakes that both sides are making. And we're going to try to keep our viewers informed. Okay, it's time for Jason Redman. He's a retired Navy SEAL. He's a New York Times best-selling author, which is not easy. We'd like to get Jason on. Do we have Jason ready to roll here? He's good. All right, Jason, can you hear me? There he is. Jason, nice beard.
Why, thank you, sir.
Looks good.
It's much more groomed than it was in Afghanistan.
It looks good. No, you're looking great. Obviously, you're doing well. I want you to tell my audience to start. Why don't you give them your background and a bit of a bio on yourself so they know who you are?
Frank, absolutely, man. Thank you for having me on.
Louder.
I'm a very fortunate individual. I served 21 years with the United States Navy as both an enlisted SEAL and as a SEAL officer. I'm a little bit unique because I am an individual who actually stumbled as a young leader and got off course and almost found myself on the tipping point of getting kicked out of the SEAL teams. But thankfully, I had some great leaders who saw my potential and said, hey, we believe in you. If we can humble you, show you how to lead. And there were a lot of great opportunities along the way to do that by going to Ranger School, by learning more about what it is to lead, specifically to lead in combat. Got myself back on track, redeemed myself, some combat deployments, found myself on the receiving end of an enemy machine gun in Iraq in 2007, and I got hit 8 times between the body and body armor, a couple rounds in the elbow that almost took my arm off. I took a round in the face, and that started a whole new journey. I began to understand that leadership is much more about attitude and how we project ourselves despite the situation that we're in. And I figured out that you can lead from any situation, even a hospital bed. Kind of got some national notoriety from a sign I placed on my hospital door that basically said, attention to all who enter here. If you're coming in this room with sadness or sorrow, don't bother. The wounds that I received, I got in a job that I love, doing it for people that I love, defending the freedom of a country that I deeply love. I will make a full recovery. What is full? That's the absolute utmost physically. I have the ability to recover, and then I'll push that about 20% further through sheer mental tenacity. This room they're about to enter is a room of fun, optimism, and intense rapid regrowth. And if you're not prepared for that, go elsewhere. So that sign just became a launch point, not just for me, but it has now become, it has been seen by millions of individuals. President Bush invited me to the White House to meet him with my family because of that sign. The sign hangs in the Wounded Ward at Walter Reed now. Secretary Robert Gates wrote about it. First Lady Michelle Obama wrote about it twice in her book. And it has motivated millions of people. And now I speak all across the country on this mindset, how you can be an effective leader, how we build and overcome mindset in the hardest situations we encounter in life. And I've just been very fortunate to get out there to take both the lessons I've gained in the SEAL team, lessons I've now gained running a nonprofit, and lessons I've gained in business, and give them back to other people to help them be better leaders and help them deal with adversity or the life ambushes, as we call them, we all encounter.
Well, that's phenomenal. Tell people about your New York Times best-selling book. What's the name of the book, and what was the construct of why you wrote the book?
So the name of the book was The Trident, The Forging and Reforging of a Navy SEAL Leader. And the reason it really is that whole story from a young man, an arrogant young man who failed. So it goes from failure to growth to redemption to catastrophic injury, and then to kind of this second level of awareness of leadership. And all along the way, it also follows my relationship with my amazing wife, the long-haired Admiral Erica. And it's a great tribute to our military families, our special operations warriors, and of course, you know, the military spouses that are out there. So a lot of lessons in the book, and it's been great for all those that have read it. And I love the fact that so many people that read the book, the feedback I get was that was not what I expected, but it was much better than what I expected. I think they went into it thinking they're going to get this great Navy SEAL book about combat, and obviously that's in there. But it's much more about a journey of leadership and what it is to be an effective leader in the hardest situations.
Well, and clearly, Jason, it's not easy to be on the top of the New York Times bestseller list. So clearly, I haven't read the book yet, but I'm going to read it. You're going to bring me a copy, I hope. I'm going to read the book. But, you know, you clearly did a great job with it. All right, let's talk about the unrest that's going on in the country. You certainly know about conflict. And there's a big discussion now, Jason, about do federal officers, do they really need to be in some of these cities? Because quite frankly, the local authorities, for whatever the reason, the local police are compromised, other things. You know, what's your feeling about Seattle and Portland, the unrest, and then the use of federal officers as it relates to these cities?
Well, I think, you know, I've been in areas of the world where you do not have laws or you have a law enforcement group that lacks both the credibility and the funding to be able to do anything. And what does that devolve into? Well, you're in a nation that has massive amounts of violence, It just unrest. People just live in fear because they can't go anywhere, and it's a hard place to live, and it breaks my heart to see areas of America that are devolving into this level, and it's just this continuous slippery slope. So if you allow individuals to not follow laws, if you're going to pick and choose based off your political views, which is a lot of what's happening in certain areas, specifically Seattle, if you look at, or Portland even, if you look at the mayor in that city, he is choosing to allow these crimes to be committed. But at what point do we just fall off into a level of total chaos and anarchy? And I think this idea that, hey, we are breaking laws and these federal agents are coming in to try and reinforce some of these laws against these federal buildings and these federal monuments and things that we have, until we can get back some order, this slippery slope will only continue until it reaches a point where you can't come back from it.
Well, you know, Jason, you're a perfect guy to talk about this because you and your cohorts fought for our ability to be able to have the First Amendment, the freedom of speech. That's what you fought for, is our way of life. But the problem is you can't combine protesting and rioting. Those are polarized names that have nothing to do with one another in my world. Protesting is one thing, rioting is another. Lawlessness is not to be condoned, because the second that you condone it, I've said on this show, Jason, is that lawlessness breeds other lawlessness. People watch television and they see what's going on. Now they think there are no more laws. That you could just go do whatever the hell you want to do. And if you want to destroy public property, you destroy public property. You take a look, Jason, at what's happened in New York City. I've been a gigantic critic of that. We've had a problem, Jason, and I want to hear your view on this, with policing in this country where certain sectors of the police people have really not done a good job as it relates to African Americans and their treatment. There's been an issue there, and we don't need to sweep it under the carpet. There's a real issue, and it's got to be fixed. You're not going to fix it, though, by defunding the police. You're not going to fix it by kicking sand in the eyes of the police. And that's exactly what's happened in Portland, Seattle, and New York. And you say?
Frank, I mean, you're 100% right. And I've got a lot of friends in law enforcement, both federally and at the local level. And a lot of them, most of them, are amazingly good people. They are willing to sacrifice so much of their lives to go into dangerous environments for very little pay. And in the last 10 years, just to be thrown under the bus, this vilification of law enforcement. But people don't understand this idea of, hey, let's defund the police, let's get rid of the police department in many places. It is a dangerous thing. You have no idea what you are asking for. You're going to be living in a world that, without police, only breeds more and more violence until finally it's going to end up on your doorstep. And so many of these people that have asked for this will regret it. It will become a world where only the individuals in the cities that have the ability to truly defend themselves are ever going to feel safe. And when you have a breakdown of that, then you have countries who, like where I was in Iraq, you had so many people who were just living day to day, just trying to survive, not going out and making a living, which is everything that America was built on.
Well, you know, the model that you come out of, Jason, is a pretty good model. I'm going to suggest to you, because I've been around a lot of special forces guys in my career, and I've been involved in Iraq and Afghanistan and businesses that I owned. But I will tell you, I don't think it matters whether you're black, you're white, you're brown in the theater that you've operated in. It matters that you're competent. I don't think that race plays any role in the world that you lived in, and that would be a great world if we could transfer that back into the United States, where we didn't look at people in that vein.
No, Frank, you're absolutely right. And it's just, I hate seeing it. We have become so racially divided in this nation. And I'll be honest, some of it is the two-party political system that we have made, and we just continue to get further and further apart on the extremes of each political party. And one party is trying to push this idea that there's massive amounts of racism. Now, don't get me wrong. I guarantee there are pockets of the country where racism. There are some cops that have done bad, no different than in any career field, including in the military. There are individuals that sometimes have misaligned values with the organization. But having come from this incredibly tight military unit with individuals from all races, colors, creeds, we all came together to work towards a common mission, and we were bonded by that mission. And nobody cared what color your skin was. I don't care what your religious beliefs were. If you were competent and you were a good member of this team, then we were able to accomplish anything. And America was built on that principle. And it bothers me that, yes, did we have issues back in the beginning? Of course. But there were visionary individuals, Abraham Lincoln, Martin Luther King, individuals who said we can be better. And I think that's critical. That's what we need to be hanging on to, as opposed to some of these people that want to erase history. They want to erase these monuments and things like that. In the military, we focused on one goal, and we all got it together. Regardless of where you came from, your background, it's what united us. And America needs to get back at that. Our political parties need to stop trying to create this division on both sides. The national media is one of the biggest threats I've watched with their information warfare they wage. Americans need to come back together, and at the end of the day, people are people. Humans are humans. Let's come back together to try and achieve, greatness and happiness and purpose for our families, which will bring America back together, in my opinion.
Well, our show here, and the reason that I'm doing it, we're the sworn enemy against ideology because it's killing our country. And I believe that we all want the same thing. We want to be healthy. We want our children to be healthy. We want our children to be educated. We want to have a safe life. I mean, we all want the same thing. It doesn't really matter. Now, to be honest, though, when you look back into our history and you go into the bowels of, America, there is systemic racism in certain sectors of our country. There is. And I've seen it and I've lived it. But at the same time, we're still the best country on the planet. We just got to figure out, no problem, either in theater as you're sitting there in the middle of a war zone or in Dallas, Texas, is ever going to be solved unless people are communicating with each other and they're operating from a standpoint of being in the middle. You're not going to accomplish things when you're as polarized as we are. So that's really an interesting scenario from you, someone that's been really involved in a lot of things that ultimately relate to this stuff. Tell people what's next on your agenda.
I am looking at a new business venture in the streaming industry, some unique new technologies that will enable us to be able to stream faster, smarter, better with some unique language capabilities. And I'm looking forward to coming on with this and helping people to go on to the next phase, the future of streaming technologies.
And how do people contact you, Jason? How do they follow you? Because my producer told me that you've got hundreds of thousands of followers, so congratulations on that. But how do people follow you?
You can go to jasonredman.com is my website where you can learn more about me. You can go to my online store. You can purchase my book, The Trident, or my newest book, Overcome. If you want to follow me on social media, Jason Redman is my public handle on Facebook. Jason Redman WW is my Instagram handle. I'm most active on Instagram. I'm also on Twitter and LinkedIn. And if you forget that, at the bottom of my jasonredman.com page is all my social media links.
All right. Well, Jason, it's been a real pleasure to have you on. I'm looking forward to meeting you later today. And I really appreciate you coming on the show. So be safe, and I'll see you in a little bit.
Frank, my honor, and thanks for what you're doing, trying to continue to represent and set a good example for other Americans out there.
All right. Thank you, Jason. Okay, so Jason Redman, another indication that there are good people out there. There is hope. But in closing, we've got to conduct ourselves with a little bit more maturity all the way around. I mean, here we sit, Washington's in gridlock. People hate each other. Again, hate breeds other hate. Remember what John Lewis, who had his funeral today, the great John Lewis, the icon from the Martin Luther King era of people that really created the ability to get civil rights and the movement really started. And he dedicated his whole life to it. But remember what Dr. Martin Luther King told John Lewis. He said, don't hate. And that's what we see today. We just see hate. It's everywhere. Hate breeds other hate. It gets carried into every form and every piece of our lives. And I just wish that people could somehow understand that whether you're a Democrat or you're a Republican or like me, you're an independent, we're all Americans. At the final assessment, we've got to be able to work as one. It's like a basketball team. Do you know when a basketball team really gets good? Is when 5 guys are operating as one. That is the trick of every coach that's ever coached a basketball game. Get the 5 guys on the floor to act as one. And that's what we've got to try to do in this country. But to be honest with you, I don't see it. And I think that the next 95 days are going to be worse than the prior 95 days. Hopefully we'll be here to cover it and we'll figure it out. All right, I thank everyone for being with us today. Don't forget again, you can reach us at the 2B Frank Show YouTube, the 2B Frank Show Twitter, the 2B Frank Show LinkedIn, and the 2B Frank Show Facebook. And again, if you're a dinosaur, the 2bfrankshow.com. You can pick up the show, and we're really, really happy that you were with us today, and we look forward to seeing you on Mondays. And until Monday, please everyone have a very safe and happy weekend. We'll see you on the next show. Signing off.